Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of Fund Manager Fridays with 5paisa.com. I'm Deepika Asthana, your host for the evening. Now, markets have started the year with like this big hurrah, and then suddenly there's been a slide this last 1 week. Um, तो जनरली अभी जैसे मार्केट का सिनारियो है हमको दो चीजें पता है एक तो है दैट देयर इज गोइंग टू बी अ गुड डील ऑफ वॉलेटिलिटी दिस ईयर बिकॉज वी थॉट दैट the worst was behind us and suddenly the year started with the omicron threat and everything just went back to maybe 2021 June. And also there is this whole talk about inflation rearing its head again and how it's going to be impacting the interest rate cycle. So in such an environment, थोड़ा investment decisions लेना difficult हो जाता है. And here is where something like an ETF, and specifically a silver ETF, could be a great value addition to your portfolio. So today, joining us to discuss about silver ETFs is Mr. Sameer Desai, National Lead ETF Retail Sales at Nippon India Life Asset Management Limited. Hi, Sameer. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Deepika. Thank you for having me over, and good evening, everyone.
Pleasure, pleasure. So, sir, like I said, कि अब uh, their market is volatile and independently invest करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है. So from that perspective, I have also heard about ETFs in the past, but maybe for our audience, could you walk us through the ETF landscape in India?
Sure, Deepika. So, ETF landscape in India is very vibrant.
Okay.
In fact, it is alive and kicking and
Hmm.
literally exploding.
Okay.
Today, the assets under management or the corpus
Hmm.
that ETFs have in India is over 400,000 crores.
Okay.
Okay, and this is increasing at a very rapid pace.
Hmm.
In fact, in the last 4 years, there's been a explosion in the ETF space, and
Hmm.
today, you have more than 100 different ETF schemes listed on the NSE and the BSE
Wow. Okay.
across equities, that is across broad market equity indices like Nifty 50, Next 50, Midcap
Hmm.
150. Then you have sector ETFs like let's say the pharma ETF, the IT
Hmm.
ETF, the bank ETF, PSU bank ETF. You also have thematic ETFs.
Okay.
Like the CPSE ETF, for example, which is the government disinvestment ETF.
Hmm.
Then you have commodity ETFs. Gold ETF has already been around for many
Hmm.
years, and now you have gold's cousin, silver, joining the bandwagon. Okay,
Hmm.
so
Sure.
and you have the fixed income ETFs. So
Correct.
the money
Hmm.
market ETFs, as well as your target maturity ETFs. So
Hmm.
literally, you have a lot of ETF building blocks
Hmm.
across asset classes, equities, fixed income, and commodities, which
Hmm.
can help investors build portfolios at a very low cost. So
Okay.
that's the ETF landscape for you in India.
Hmm.
All kinds of investors are using ETFs, right from the government of India in its disinvestment program, uh, insurance companies, large institutional
Right.
investors.
Hmm.
Then you have the pension funds. The EPFO is one of the
Hmm.
largest investors in ETFs. Uh,
Okay.
in
Hmm.
fact, when the pension market opened up in 2015,
Hmm.
EPFO took a conscious decision to invest through the ETF route in equities. So these are the
Okay.
large investors. Then you have HNIs, you have retail investors. So all kinds of investors are using ETFs. And as I said, ETF growth is literally exploding.
वाओ! इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग टू नो दैट सर बिकॉज़ जब हम लोग इक्विटी मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, हम लोग सिर्फ डायरेक्ट लाइक यूजुअली वी ओनली थिंक अबाउट डायरेक्ट इक्विटीज, बट देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ इनोवेशन हैपनिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ द काइंड ऑफ व्हीकल्स वी कैन यूज टू पार्टिसिपेट इन द इक्विटी मार्केट्स. So from that perspective, how if you could just maybe walk us through one, the mechanisms of ETF, and two, then how ETFs make a very compelling investment choice, or what are the advantages of ETFs?
Sure, that's a great question. So ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund, and
Sure.
as the name suggests,
Hmm.
these are index funds listed on the stock exchange. So
Okay.
typically, the underlying portfolio of any ETF is an index,
Hmm.
and this portfolio can be literally bought and sold real time on the stock exchange. So two
Hmm.
major advantages. One
Okay.
is the index diversification and
Hmm.
the real-time pricing of stocks. So advantages of
Okay.
mutual funds and stocks in one product is the
Mm-hmm.
ETF for you. Okay,
Okay.
and what is the advantage of investing in an index? So
Hanji.
when you invest in an index, you
Mm-hmm.
do away with the stock specific risk of investing. Okay,
Correct.
because the
Mm-hmm.
index is a diversified portfolio, and
Mm-hmm.
since you are investing in an index, you
Mm-hmm.
also do away with the fund manager risk. So what are
Okay.
the two
Mm.
major risks of investing? One is the systemic risk or the market risk, which is common to anything that you do. So
Correct.
if the market falls, even the index will lose value, even stocks will lose value, even
Mm-hmm.
portfolios managed by fund managers will lose value.
Sure.
But when the market moves up, okay,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the individual stocks or the schemes managed by fund managers may
Mm-hmm.
not move as much as the index. They may beat
Sure.
the index
Mm-hmm.
or they may underperform the index. Okay,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
so the additional stock specific risk and the
Mm-hmm.
fund manager risk, which is over and above the market risk, what
Mm-hmm.
we technically call the non systemic risk, is
Hanji.
done away with in the ETF. Okay, so if I
Mm-hmm.
have to use a simple analogy from
Mm-hmm.
sports,
Sure.
okay, you have the gold medalists, the bronze
Mm-hmm.
medalists, and the silver medalists.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, think of gold medal as the outperforming stock or the outperforming fund manager,
Mm-hmm.
and think of the bronze medal as the underperforming stock and the underperforming fund manager. And
Mm-hmm.
index is silver medal by default. Okay, so
Okay.
why
Mm-hmm.
so why do you buy stocks, or why do you give your money to fund managers? Because you want to generate alpha, you want to
Correct. Mm-hmm.
outperform the index and be in the gold medal position. But that
Mm-hmm.
always doesn't happen. You may end up in the bronze medal position. So when you
Right.
are in an index ETF, you
Mm-hmm.
are assured of the silver medal slot by default.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so uh, you may not get the gold medal, you may end up in the bronze medal situation. And most of the data in India, at least in the
Mm-hmm.
large cap space, is
Mm-hmm.
telling us that most of the fund managers are in the bronze medal position. So at least
Mm-hmm.
assure your silver slot via the ETF, okay, is the simple message. So going forward, what is the rate of return which is assured to be? It is the index rate of return. जो भी रिटर्न निफ्टी का होगा या निफ्टी नेक्स्ट 50 का होगा या कोई भी इंडेक्स का होगा, that is assured to me when I invest in that particular ETF. So this is the advantage of investing in an ETF.
Yeah. Excellent. I think आपने बहुत especially that analogy जो आपने बताई between gold, silver and bronze medal. It's very interesting because you're right. We invest to get that gold, but obviously वो gold के लिए risk लेना पड़ता है. एंड ब्रॉन्ज के लिए और भी रिस्क हो जाता है बट सिल्वर इज समथिंग व्हिच इज काइंड ऑफ अ गारंटीड थिंग कि आपको मार्केट लेवल रिटर्न तो मिल ही जाएगा वेदर दैट इज पॉजिटिव और नेगेटिव इज ऑफ कोर्स डिफरेंट थिंग बट मार्केट लेवल रिटर्न्स आपको मिलेगा ही व्हिच इज ग्रेट सो सर अभी you Nippon has I think one silver ETF and one silver FOF NFO going ongoing at the current moment. So from that perspective, before we get into maybe these individual offerings, can you first just walk us through what are the criteria that AMCs are required to follow as per SEBI for such sort of funds?
Sure, Deepika. So recently, SEBI announced the framework or the regulatory guidelines
Mm-hmm,
which led to the launch of silver ETFs. So those
mm-hmm,
guidelines were just released recently.
mm-hmm.
Most of the guidelines are identical to the guidelines governing the gold ETFs or the gold
Okay.
FOFs. Okay,
Mm-hmm,
and gold ETFs, as we all know, have been around for now nearly 15 years. The oldest gold ETF was launched in 2007. So let me highlight some of the regulatory guidelines that
sure.
govern the that will govern the silver ETFs. So, for
Hanji.
example, the ETF has to, as per regulatory guideline,
Mm-hmm.
invest in 99.9% purity silver bars. So
Okay.
the purity is assured because that is the
Mm-hmm,
regulation.
mm-hmm,
Secondly, regulation also, tells AMCs that
mm-hmm.
they have to benchmark the price to the London bullion daily spot fixing price of silver. So every
Okay.
AMC has to follow that guideline, and that is
Mm-hmm.
the source price from which the NAV is derived. Uh, the
Mm-hmm.
Nippon
Okay.
India Silver ETF will represent roughly one ETF share will represent roughly 1 gram of gold. So that is the way it will be priced. So
Mm-hmm.
these are, as I said, some of the regulatory guidelines that govern the ETFs. The
Mm-hmm.
overall framework, I will
Mm-hmm.
repeat, is
Hanji.
identical to the framework which is applicable to the gold ETFs.
Gold ETFs. Understood. Understood. Perfect, sir. So, one question which actually, when I was even doing some research on this topic was ki, why exposure to precious metals at all? When we're taking the ETF or MF route, why should we take this route to get exposure to precious metals? Because India mein to we buy physical assets, we buy the physical metal. So how is an ETF or an MF route more advantageous to gain exposure to precious metal?
Sure. So this is, a very common question that we face. In fact, we have been through the years have been asked this question for gold also.
Hanji.
So physical metal versus the electronic or the paper route, which is the
Mhm.
ETF slash mutual fund route.
Right.
Very simple. There are a lot of hassles with regards to the physical metal. Okay.
Mhm, mhm,
So typically, an investor, has hassles of storage,
mhm,
purity,
mhm,
insurance. Now, all these aspects are taken care of in the
mhm,
ETF slash the mutual fund route, because when you buy, let's say, a silver ETF or a gold ETF or
mhm.
any commodity metal ETF,
Hanji.
basically what happens is the physical metal, as per regulation, is stored in the custodian appointed by the AMC. So you
Okay.
don't have to, so typically the investor doesn't have to handle or take care of the physical metal.
Mhm.
Secondly, the purity is again assured because of the regulation, and there is an audit
Right.
of the purity. Okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you
Mhm,
go outside and try to buy the physical metal, you are
mhm.
not always assured about the purity. Okay.
Correct.
And
Right.
that purity may differ from jeweler to jeweler, or entity to entity. So this
Hanji.
is assured in the MF route.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
insurance is also taken care of because that's a part of the expense ratio. So when the
Okay.
physical metal
Mhm,
is stored with the custodian, the
mhm,
insurance is also taken care of. So all
mhm,
these hassles which
mhm,
are there in handling the physical metal
mhm,
go away in the ETF slash the mutual fund route. So it is a much more efficient way of
mhm,
taking exposure to the
mhm.
physical metal.
Interesting, interesting. So, जो आप जो समझाए हैं, I think what I understand from that is कि whatever benefit you get from the metal, you'll get that, but the associated inconveniences, in terms of storage costs or like you said, purity, all of those things are taken care of. So they are not attached when
Exactly.
you. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And there's one more benefit which I would like to highlight.
हाँ जी.
In the silver ETF fund of fund, for example, okay, which is
Mm-hmm.
the mutual fund route,
Mm-hmm.
one can start an investment with as little as rupees 100.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So
That's
it's
interesting.
very, very, very retail investor friendly. One
Mm-hmm.
can sign up for an SIP, for example. Okay. So
Okay.
these are, some of the advantages that you will never get in a physical metal when you buy a physical metal.
Definitely. I think the ability to buy fractional physical metal or physical assets is a big thing, right? Because हम लोग बहुत many of us are not able to actually gain the advantage of investing in metal क्योंकि we don't have that kind of upfront money ki, and with prices going up it's not possible, but this access to fractional investment and also through an SIP is great. Matlab, it's easy to then get that exposure, so that indeed is a very interesting advantage. So
Yeah.
sir, moving on from the ETF specifically, um, can we talk a little bit about why silver in term, because I think you'll agree, thoda it's a little unique right now for Indian investors. Gold, like you said, has been around for a while, but why silver, and how does it figure, like in terms of correlation with gold or equities, and also how its price movements are in terms of volatility?
Sure, Deepika. So when the silver NFOs were announced,
Continue.
I couldn't but help think of that saying in English, born with a
Mhm.
silver spoon in your mouth. Okay, now most of us are not born with a silver spoon in our mouth, unfortunately, but
Correct.
most of us can participate in the silver ETF or the silver ETF fund of fund, because
Mhm.
as we discussed in the previous question, an
100.
investment as little as rupees 100, which is
Mhm.
probably lower than the price of petrol,
Mm.
one can
Yeah.
invest that amount. Okay, so
Mhm.
that is the thought that came to my mind. now,
Mhm.
why silver when gold is already there? Okay, so
Correct.
that's the first
Mhm.
question. So,
Mhm.
silver is an additional diversification tool available within the commodity space,
Mhm.
which Indian investors can now capitalize on. So,
Mhm.
just as let me take the analogy of the equity diversification. So,
Sure.
just like we allocate to large cap, mid caps, and small caps within
Mhm.
the overall equity allocation,
Mhm.
similarly, one can also diversify between silver and gold within the
Mhm.
commodity allocation. Okay,
Mhm.
so that is where silver has a use within the commodity asset allocation.
Mhm.
The other advantage is, and if we can upload a slide
Mhm.
about the correlation, uh,
Certainly.
so there we will see the correlation. Uh,
Mhm.
I will just explain this in a moment as the slide is uploaded.
Mhm.
So basically, the data that we are about to see is the correlation that silver has with Indian equities. Now,
Sure.
this
Okay.
data is for a time period April 2005 to December 2021.
Mhm.
As you can see in both the tables, uh,
Mhm.
this is a daily rolling return. Rolling return simply gives you a lot of data points. It is a
Okay.
more robust way of looking at the return than the point to point return. So, as you
Sure.
can see from both the tables, silver
Mhm.
has a negative correlation with equities. Okay, so when you compare
Mhm.
silver with the large cap equity index, Nifty 50,
Mhm.
Nifty 100, the mid cap
Mhm.
index, 150, the
Mhm.
small cap index 250, and the total equity
Mhm.
index, which is the
Mhm.
500 index. You see the
Mhm.
correlation is negative. This simply means that
Mhm.
both will move in opposite directions most of the time.
Mhm.
So, for example,
Okay.
if equities are falling, silver will go up just like gold. So, this is a negative correlation. So, what this does is to
Mhm.
practice the principle of asset allocation, which we talk about all the time, you
Mhm.
need negatively correlated assets combined in a portfolio to bring
Mhm.
down the overall portfolio risk. Okay, so this is what
Understood. Mhm.
negative correlation does.
Mhm.
Negative correlation, asset allocation, with negatively correlated asset classes is
Mhm.
something, if I have to use a very simple analogy, it is
Mhm.
something like your Indian thali.
Okay.
इंडियन थाली में दाल चावल रोटी सब्जी हम लोग सब कुछ लेते हैं. So think of
बिल्कुल.
this as various asset classes. Okay, now
Mhm.
we don't eat only rice, for example. So let's say
Correct.
equities. Okay, or only dal, for example. Let's say fixed income. Okay, I'm just
Mhm.
drawing some parallels. Okay,
Sure.
so this is what asset allocation does. You combine negatively correlated asset classes in a portfolio to bring down the overall portfolio risk. So this is what
Mhm.
this tells you. And the next part of your question was, I think, on the volatility of gold and silver. So
Yes.
if we go to there is one more slide that we have.
Sure.
So if we
Mhm.
shift to this slide,
This is
so
the one?
although gold and silver are like cousins, maybe if I may use that
Mhm.
word,
Mhm.
both have a slightly different correlation. So, correlation over long periods of time may be similar, but in
Mhm.
short periods of time, the correlation
Mhm.
is different simply because silver has a larger industrial use, which gold does not have. Gold is more
Mhm.
of a store of value. It is
Right.
more used in jewelry and ornaments, but silver
Mhm.
has other uses also, mainly the
Mhm.
industrial uses. So this is the
Mhm.
correlation in the short term and the long term.
Understood. Mhm. Mhm. So, sir, can it? I mean, So I understand what you said in terms of why silver is a compelling investment choice from a portfolio perspective. But yeah, can you share some thoughts with us in terms of how do you see silver prices going up in the near future? Because like you said, it's also driven a lot by industrial demand. And now that we are coming out of the pandemic, there are hopes of economic recovery. So is this one of the factors that could probably contribute to silver doing well in the near future?
Absolutely, Deepika, because as I said, uh, the traditional uses of silver, which were coins, historically, I mean, jewelry,
100.
silverware,
Mhm,
that proportion is actually a very small use of silver today.
mhm,
The major uses are the industrial uses. So I
mhm,
will answer this question in two parts. One are the traditional industrial uses. So
mhm,
what are those uses? For example, electronics.
mhm,
Silver is a great conductor of electricity, so
mhm.
it is a major input in electronic components. Okay,
Sure.
so that
Okay.
is one of the major traditional uses. Silver is also used as a catalyst in many of the industrial processes. So you have a
Okay.
lot of chemical processes in various industries where silver
Mhm,
is used as a catalyst.
mhm,
Another use is it is used to coat medical devices because it
mhm,
has anti disinfectant properties. So it is a
mhm,
disinfectant, so it is used to coat medical devices. It is used in x-ray films, photographic films. It is
mhm,
used in automotive ball bearings, for example. These
mhm,
are
mhm.
some of the traditional uses of silver. But
Sure.
what is
Mhm,
more exciting and what is going to probably drive the demand in the future
mhm,
are the what we call the new age uses of silver. So what are
mhm,
those? For example, 5G networks. Now
right.
5G networks require silver to help these networks function flawlessly and seamlessly. See,
Mhm,
what happens is a lot many times communication networks
mhm.
suffer from what we call latency problems. So
Okay.
this problem is minimized with the use of silver. Now, as 5G networks get rolled out in many countries, even in India, maybe in a short time, we will
Mhm,
see silver usage going up because it's an important input in this
mhm.
industry. Uh,
Okay.
Solar power. Solar power is another major user of silver. So solar
Mhm.
cells require silver as a major input in the photovoltaic cells. Okay,
Okay.
we have all
Mhm.
been hearing about climate change,
Right.
carbon emissions. You have a lot of stringent climate, the Paris Accord, which
Right. Right.
enforces a lot of protocols. So as this, and is enforced and
Mhm,
move happens from the traditional carbon sources of energy to the green sources of energy like solar, silver
mhm,
usage is going to automatically go up. So these are some of the new age uses of silver which will
mhm.
drive the use of silver going forward.
Perfect. So what I hear from you is that कि जो अपने traditional industrial demand drivers for silver हैं, those are already in place. But in addition to that, there are also many new age applications which are emerging and which are maybe going to take off in the near future, which would add to the demand for silver.
Yes, definitely.
Perfect, perfect. Sir, before I move on, one of our viewers has a question. I think he needs to wants a clarification around who is the custodian. आपने mention करा था that the physical metal is with the custodian. So who is this custodian?
The custodian in our case, that is the Nippon India Silver ETF and the Silver
Mhm,
ETF Fund of Fund, is
mhm.
Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank. Okay, perfect. I hope that answers his question. So, sir, moving on, we've discussed in detail about ETFs and silver ETFs and how they can add value, but from a more personal perspective or a more like investor perspective, how should investors position a fund like this in their own portfolios?
Uh, yes, that's also an important question. So, a couple of points. So, one is the correlation with equities, which I mentioned just a few minutes back.
Ji.
Because silver has a negative correlation, so it is a important portfolio building block in the overall portfolio construction or asset allocation. So
Sure.
along with gold, a little bit of silver is also required in the portfolio for
Mm-hmm.
diversification within the commodity space, exactly like you diversify within equities between large caps, mid caps, and small caps. Okay, so that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Silver is also a hedge against inflation and a
Right.
currency hedge. So when we
Mm-hmm.
look at the data over long periods of time, for example, if I look at the data from January 1990, say, to December 2021, over long
Hanji.
periods of time, silver has given a return slightly in excess of double digits, so maybe around 11 to 11.5% CAGR.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you see, this is the INR return. The dollar return is slightly lower, but if the
Mm-hmm.
rupee depreciates, then that
Mm-hmm.
will be built into the INR return for the Indian investors. Okay, so
Understood.
that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the advantages going forward in the future. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Also, because it has industrial usage. Okay, it will behave slightly different than gold, although
Mm-hmm.
it is a precious metal. So, considering its slightly different characteristics than gold, it is
Mm-hmm.
important to combine it with gold in the commodity allocation of the
Okay.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
portfolio. So,
Mm-hmm.
to summarize, it
Hanji.
is one more tool available within the commodity space for
Mm-hmm.
diversification. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
this was not
Mm-hmm.
there earlier. Now with the CB guidelines in place,
Hanji.
this
Mm-hmm.
Indian investors can take advantage of this.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, sir. I think this has been a very interesting discussion because I think a lot of our viewers who've tuned in today and who will see this video in the week to come as well uh, are not fully aware कि what are these silver ETFs? ETFs क्या होते हैं? Silver में क्यों invest करना चाहिए? तो whatever we have discussed today, I think will shed a lot of light on that. But before we wind up, if there is just a few words that you would like to sum up the entire conversation with.
Yes. So first of all, let me just highlight the NFO dates for the benefit
Yes,
of the
please.
investors.
Yes, please.
So the NFO, both the Nippon India Silver ETF NFO and the Nippon India Silver ETF FOF NFO
Mm-hmm,
have opened on 13th of January. They
mm-hmm,
will remain open for subscription till
mm-hmm.
27th of January 2022. Uh,
Okay.
Secondly, convenience of the mutual fund route. I will again, highlight this fact. In the ETF route or in the fund of fund route, one
Mm-hmm,
does away with the hassle of handling the physical metal. The physical
mm-hmm,
metal's purity is taken care of by regulation. Storage is taken care of because of the custodian. So no hassles of handling the physical metal. One can invest small amounts, as little as rupees 100. One can start an SIP. Silver is a currency hedge and an inflation hedge. If one follows the fund of fund route,
mm-hmm,
there is no exit load beyond 15 days holding. So if you
mm-hmm,
hold your units beyond 15 days from allotment, there is no
mm-hmm.
exit load. And
Okay.
one last very important point which I would like to highlight is,
Mm-hmm,
see, there are a lot of silver ETF NFOs open currently. Now,
mm-hmm.
all the ETFs are beginning their careers at the same time. So there is no past track record of any fund. So
You're right.
how does one
Mm-hmm.
select the silver ETF NFO? So we
Right.
have to look at the gold data point because that is the nearest data point which is available to us. Now,
Mm-hmm,
here one has to look at the track record of the gold ETFs in India. So we have the oldest gold ETF in India. We
okay.
have the largest gold ETF in India. And
Mm-hmm.
the most important parameter in an ETF is the daily average volume, the liquidity. So we
Right.
have the
Mm-hmm,
highest liquidity in the gold ETF in India. So, for example, for a time period ended December 31st, 2021, for a
mm-hmm,
period of 1 year, our
mm-hmm.
daily average volume is 10 times the gold ETF industry in India. Okay. So
Okay.
this is
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
data point, or this is the track record that
mm-hmm,
one has to consider in
mm-hmm,
selecting the silver ETF NFO. So this is what I would like to say. So these are some of the points that I
mm-hmm.
would like to make.
Perfect. So thank you for sharing these insights and these details. And friends, if you feel that the Nippon India Silver ETF or the Nippon India Silver FOF can add value to your investment portfolio, and as we have highlighted, there's definitely great potential for that as well. You can log on to the 5paisa website and invest in these funds, or you can download the 5paisa app where the fund is available for investment. You can subscribe to the NFO and potentially gain from this investment. So please go ahead, try that. And thank you very much, sir, for coming here today and helping us understand this very interesting topic. And also, friends, for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepika, for having me over and wishing all your investors a safe and healthy year ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.